She announced it like a scheduling note rather than a threat, informing him she would defeat him in a minute, and asking if he preferred it to be a clean minute or a memorable one. He checked his watch, which was not a smart device, and had survived 3 decades without knowing the internet, and said he was technically on a lunch break, so memorable would be nice. This did not land the way jokes usually did with her kind. She adjusted her stance, long ears angling back in what her people considered generosity, and activated a field that hummed with the promise of broken bones. The street around them remained stubbornly ordinary, which annoyed her more than his smile. She counted down out loud, because tradition mattered, and because intimidation worked better with numbers. At 58 seconds, her combat system flashed a warning about atmospheric irregularities. At 47 seconds, it suggested recalibration. At 32 seconds, it asked, politely, whether she was sure about this opponent. She told it to stop being dramatic. The human man stepped aside to let a delivery drone pass, apologized to it, then to her, as if the situation were a minor inconvenience rather than a duel sanctioned by interstellar law. She lunged, something went wrong. Not catastrophically, just enough that her foot met empty air where ground should have been, and she found herself correcting mid-motion, which cost her dignity and 2 seconds. He didn't counterattack. He waited. This was worse. Her people trained for resistance, not patience. She swung again, faster, and her strike connected with something that felt like a mistake. Her arm tingled, not with pain, but with the sensation of having chosen poorly. Her system chimed and informed her that probability had shifted. She demanded to know how. It refused to elaborate and suggested breathing exercises. The human man asked if she was okay and offered her a napkin because she had somehow spilled his drink. She told him to focus. He said he was focusing very hard on not being late back to work. She accelerated, compressing motion into a blur that had ended wars, and the world responded by rearranging itself just enough to inconvenience her. A loose tile, a distracted pigeon, a child laughing at exactly the wrong moment. None of it should have mattered, all of it did. Her countdown reached 10 seconds and she realized with a creeping irritation that she was sweating. He, meanwhile, was narrating her missed strikes like a sports commentator who didn't know the rules. At 5 seconds, she attempted a finishing move that required absolute certainty. The moment she committed, certainty slipped. Not vanished, just sidestepped. She found herself face to face with him again, close enough to hear his heartbeat, which was annoyingly calm. He leaned in and said very quietly that he didn't want to win, and that might be the problem. Her timer hit 0. Nothing exploded. No one fell. Her system shut itself off with a sound like a disappointed sigh. She stood there, minutes spent, undefeated in every way that mattered to her culture and somehow still at a loss. He asked if she wanted to sit down. She did not answer immediately. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure what the next move was, and that uncertainty, more than any blow, landed cleanly. She did not sit down. She stood for an additional 12 seconds, because standing was still a kind of victory, then informed him that the duel was postponed due to anomalous interference, which was a perfectly legal phrase meaning she had no idea what had just happened. He accepted this with visible relief and said postponements were his favorite kind of confrontation. Her combat system rebooted without asking and began logging the encounter as a social interaction, which she deleted 3 times before it stubbornly reappeared with a cheerful tone. She demanded his classification. Civilian, soldier, enhanced, reality bender. He said he was technically an intern, though no one was quite sure of what. This answer triggered a subroutine labeled existential concern. She circled him, recalibrating her perception filters, and found nothing to latch onto. No threat spike, no power surge, no hidden weapon. Just the same infuriating calm and the faint sense that outcomes were queuing up behind him, waiting their turn. She launched a micro-drone, which promptly lost interest and began following a cat. He suggested the cat was probably in charge. They tried again, more cautiously. She initiated a low-impact strike, the kind used to test reflexes. He tripped over nothing and fell out of the way, apologizing to the ground. Her strike missed, but the miss felt intentional, as if the universe had leaned slightly to the left. She increased gravity around him by a fractional amount. He complained about his knees and sat down voluntarily, which somehow nullified the effect. Her system flagged this as non-compliant physics. She told it to stop naming things. Time stretched in odd ways. Minutes passed without resolution. She attacked, he avoided without trying. She escalated, he diffused with humor, asking if this counted as cardio. At one point she cornered him, certain this time, absolutely certain, and a maintenance robot rolled between them, announcing a wet floor that neither of them had noticed. She stared at the sign. He nodded solemnly as if it were a respected elder. Her certainty cracked, just a hair, and the moment dissolved. She began to talk, which was not in her training. She talked about honor, about strength measured in victories, about how her people respected dominance because dominance kept the stars quiet. He listened genuinely and said the stars where he came from were never quiet, and that maybe that was okay. She asked him what he was doing. He said he was letting things happen. This answer made her angrier than any insult. Letting things happen was how planets fell. Her system interrupted to announce a statistical impossibility. The longer the engagement continued, the less likely she was to win, regardless of force applied. It suggested disengagement and offered a joke to lighten the mood. She turned it off entirely. Without it, the world felt louder. She moved again, slower this time, and felt the shift before it happened, like a coin deciding how it would land. He met her eyes and said he didn't think she was wrong, just early. When she stopped, it wasn't because she was defeated. It was because she was curious. That realization unsettled her more than the minute she had already lost. He checked his watch again and sighed, then smiled, as if this strange, unfinished conflict had somehow gone exactly as planned. She initiated the final phase herself, which surprised them both. Not with a strike or a command, but with a question that had no tactical value. She asked him what would happen if she stopped trying to win. He blinked, clearly unprepared for that one, then said something unhelpful about how that depended on what she thought winning was. Her systems, partially reactivated against her better judgment, attempted to calculate an answer and crashed in silence. She took that as permission. The dual space, such as it was, had attracted attention. Sensors from orbit lingered. Observers waited for a decisive outcome they could catalog. She felt their expectations like a weight, heavier than gravity manipulation ever was. She moved once more, not attacking, just stepping into the probability field she had been resisting all along. The universe responded the way it had been trying to from the beginning, not with force, but with alignment. Everything clicked into a version of events where nothing needed to break. He laughed, a short, surprised sound, and said that was usually how it went. She asked him, finally, what he was. Not his species, not his rank, but the thing she had been fighting without knowing it. He thought for a long moment, then said he wasn't strong in the way she meant, and he wasn't weak either. He said he noticed where things wanted to go and stopped pushing back. He called it a bad habit learned from surviving meetings. Her translator flagged this as humor and gave up. The observers withdrew. No victory signal was transmitted. No defeat either. The record would show an inconclusive encounter, which in her culture was worse than loss and better than heresy. She should have cared more. Instead, she felt lighter, as if something tightly coiled had finally been set down. She deactivated her combat protocols completely, knowing that doing so marked the end. He checked his watch one last time and said he was definitely late now. They parted without ceremony. No promises, no rematch. She returned to her vessel and filed a report that contained no lies and almost no data. She wrote that humanity possessed a strategic anomaly impossible to neutralize through dominance. She wrote that engagement through force was ineffective, and that observation suggested an alternative approach involving patience, humor, and the acceptance of uncertainty. The report was flagged, reviewed, and quietly buried. As the ship left orbit, she replayed the moment where she had stopped, not the failure to strike, but the choice to ask. It occurred to her that strength might not be about ending things, but about allowing them to finish on their own terms. This thought would have horrified her instructors. It made her smile anyway. Back on the surface, the human man returned to work, unanswered emails waiting like nothing extraordinary had happened. Someone asked him why he was smiling. He said he'd had a weird lunch break. Somewhere between stars, an alien warrior adjusted her understanding of the universe by a single degree, which turned out to be enough.